Hello and welcome to Hispanic Agenda, Washington's only bilingual news program. I'm Alejandro Negron. Thank you for watching. On today's agenda, Hillary Clinton bets on a dreamer to get her message out to Latinos. More on that later with the Roundtable. But first, changes to local policing. The federal government will stop providing some types of military equipment to local law enforcement agencies and restrict the use of others. By executive order, President Obama is attempting to curb the militarization of police. Also, the administration issued a report Monday recommending the federal government to stop using state and local police agencies enforcing immigration laws. Joining me now to discuss these recommendations and changes, attorney Joseph Maluf and Lydia Rodriguez, lead organizer in Baltimore for Casa de Maryland. Welcome both to Hispanic Agenda. It's a pleasure to have you both.
Thank you.
Joseph, I'll start with you. SWAT teams, I guess, aren't anything new necessarily, but I guess the concern is with the militarization, this heavy equipment, the tactics that are being used outside of the special circumstances that I guess SWAT teams were created to handle. When did this militarization start and why?
Well, it started because during the war in Iraq, the military accumulated a lot of equipment. Humvees and other vehicles that are used during the war there was a surplus. So at that point, there was a bill passed in Congress allowing local police to petition for equipment such as, tanks and things like that, and they were given it very readily available. And what that created, of course, it's a way to use equipment and recycle, which was a great idea, but it created a lot of tension in the community when approached by police in military gear.
And I guess we were all witness of that, watching the situation unfold in Ferguson, Baltimore, New York, where this heavy equipment was used. Now, by executive order, the president is trying to curb this militarization. What will this executive order ban? What would it limit? And what stays the same?
Well, definitely the equipment, the large equipment such as Humvees and tanks and things of that nature are not going to be used anymore by local police. Other things, I think, like vest, bulletproof, things like that, that's not really an issue because it doesn't tend to intimidate the community as the large military equipment does.
Lydia, let me get you in here. How are communities of color especially affected by this militarization?
Well, there's a big fear aspect. There's an intimidation that the men in uniform are projecting to the community. So it almost feels like a war front, and it shouldn't. And usually during this events in Baltimore, the National Guard was present in the communities primarily of color, but they weren't present in the white communities. So it showed a lot of inequality and a lot of injustice feeling for the community folks.
As a community organizer, when you see police with these heavy uniforms and almost tanks and Humvees, not necessarily tanks, I don't think we saw tanks in Baltimore, but these very large Humvees, how does it make those that are protesting, for example, police brutality, feel when they're in a protest such as what we saw in Baltimore or Ferguson?
Sure, it feels like they're jeopardizing our constitutional right to assemble. So there's that fear, that tension, that you don't want me to be here doing what we feel is right. And
you fear that heavy presence of military equipment basically escalates situations?
Sure, it could definitely trigger those things because it's that intimidation aspect.
And that's precisely what the president was saying.
Absolutely. I mean, think about it. During war, the people who are wearing the uniforms and these heavy pieces of equipment are the enemy. Basically, two enemies, and here's the public versus the police. And when you say it like that, people are intimidated naturally by that.
Now, let me ask you about those who say, well, crime is down in the United States. Why would we try to fix something that isn't broken? Why should we stop allowing the police to do what they've been doing?
Well,
look at the result. Crime is down. Why the change?
Crime is down, but we have seen a lot more incidents of police brutality. We have seen a lot more inequality in the system, and we have seen, to a great extent, lack of cooperation from immigrant communities, fear of being deported, fear of consequences. So they don't speak out, and that makes communities more dangerous.
And talking about immigrant communities, we're going to talk about this in the next segment. Please stay with us, and you stay with us. We'll continue the conversation. On the other side of the break, when we come back, we'll get into the White House report that recommends that local police shouldn't enforce immigration laws. Coming up here on the Hispanic Agenda on News Channel 8. Welcome back to Hispanic Agenda. I'm Alejandro Negron. We're discussing changes in local policing with attorney Joseph Maluf and Lydia Rodriguez, lead organizer in Baltimore for Casa de Maryland. Welcome back to the program. Now I want to move on to these recommendations by this White House report that state and local police should not enforce immigration laws. At the moment, how are local police and state police enforcing immigration laws?
Well,
Joseph.
What happens when someone gets arrested, that they bring him to the detention center to be fingerprinted. Now, the fingerprinting system they use is really a scanner. They scan your fingerprints, and that gets sent to the corrections state facility. And in that facility, they have information regarding your immigration status through a database, a federal database that local enforcement have access to.
This is if someone has been deported in the past or has some type of deportation order?
It could have a deportation order. It could have any kind of civil procedure pending. And that's really the key, is that that is a civil matter. It's not a criminal case for local enforcement to treat it as a criminal case. So what happens is that once they know that that person has been arrested, generally Homeland Security sends a civil request, not an order, that that person be held so that they could pick him up.
These are these detention orders that we've been reading about for the past, I want to say 5-6 years, correct?
Absolutely.
This is secure communities. Now,
Right.
in Baltimore, in Maryland, Casa de Maryland specifically, you guys have been very much involved trying to help immigrants who have gotten caught in this process and are in jail indefinitely because of these detention orders, correct?
Right. So, you know, when it comes to these detention orders and it comes to the police, you know, the role of the police is to keep the community safe. So if immigrant community members are fearing that, you know, if they report a crime or if something happens to them, they can't trust police officials because they might get into bigger troubles than they are already. So we've had a lot of cases where community members have actually, they've been brutalized by other community members and haven't picked up the phone and called a police officer because they're in fear that the police officer may turn them into immigration.
This is an important point because I think when people who don't follow immigration law or things that happen inside of immigrant communities hear that the police shouldn't enforce immigration laws, they immediately feel like, well, that's not very smart. It's the police. They should be enforcing immigration laws. But what you're saying is that, let's say you want to get a really bad character out of an immigrant community, someone that should be deported. Those people are not being reported to the police because those other immigrants fear contact with the police. Therefore, the system doesn't allow, you know, for the police to get those very bad people out of the community. So it's counterproductive.
It also makes a target for the immigrant communities, knowing that a lot of folks know that, hey, if I rob them, they probably won't report me. So it's causing a target and an insecurity in a community.
That's exactly what it creates. Is a more dangerous community. So the whole concept of secured communities became unsecured communities because people realized, hey, we can complain, we can commit crimes, no one will complain. And that is something that at least in
and they become an easy target.
Very easy.
And this is what we see in many immigrant communities, and sometimes the people doing the targeting are members of the community.
Well, not just immigrant communities. Everything we've seen that has led us to this idea that there'll be body cameras on police officers tells you that a lot of the communities are also afraid because of what they see on television, how police are reacting to the public. So there should be this idea that the community feel closer to the police is the way to have more safe communities.
Now, we should also mention that many police departments, specifically police chiefs, have expressed that they are not interested in enforcing immigration law.
Chief Manager in Montgomery County, Maryland, was one of the first leaders in police departments that ordered that. and worked with Executive Legate to make sure that that was put in place much longer than other counties that ultimately followed.
But some people see that as politicians pandering to Latinos.
These are numbers. The studies and the numbers are real, and the president had a task force look at this statistically and found out and concluded and recommended to the president that they cease and desist any application of local police into immigration law.
It's smarter policing.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, I want to thank you both for your time and your insight. It was a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you.
All right. When we come back, a major presidential candidate bets on a dreamer to get the message out to Latinos. The Roundtable is next as Hispanic Agenda continues here on News Channel 8. Welcome back to Hispanic Agenda. I'm Alejandro Negron, and welcome to our Roundtable. ABC 7 News, John Gonzalez, attorney Mo Vela, ex-advisor to Vice President Biden, and Judy Pino from the Libre Initiative. The first item for the Roundtable, Hillary Clinton taps a dreamer to lead her outreach efforts to Latinos. Her name is Loreya Praeli. She was undocumented for 13 years, and during that time, she became a prominent advocate for immigration reform. She received her green card, I guess, in 2012. John?
Well,
what else do we know about this?
It's the way of the future, I guess. We're seeing more and more that Congress, Capitol Hill, and politics in this country has realized already that the Latino vote is key, and it's going to become greater and greater in future elections. And Hillary Clinton is already tapping into that. She's obviously made this decision, and this is already a long list of Latinos that are in her power, if you will. She's got Amanda Renteria. She's the national political director for Hillary Clinton. Jose Villarreal. He's the treasurer for her campaign, and other organizers she's hired. For example, Emmy Ruiz and Jorge Neri. So she's obviously, feeling this, I wouldn't say pressure from the Latino community, but it's an obvious and logical move for her, and I think we're going to see more and more candidates move in this direction.
Mo, one of the things that I guess is great or inspiring about this story is that there is a lot of talent in that dreamer segment of the community. Kids who were brought here illegally as children through no fault of their own, and have no status or haven't had the opportunity to get their status straightened out. And there's a lot of talent out there that could be potentially used by this country.
I'm thrilled that Secretary Clinton has named not only this young lady, but in addition to the list, John just named Xochitl Hinojosa, the new Deputy Communications Director for the campaign. I just find it all interesting and curious how Secretary Clinton is naming all these Latinas and Latinos to top posts in her campaign, while the Republicans are crisscrossing the country trying to figure out how to deport all these 15 million Latinos.
Man, he started pretty early.
One's picking them, one's trying to get rid of them. The choice is becoming clear already, and we're, 18 months away? It's amazing.
Judy Pino, your thoughts on Hillary Clinton's not only campaign, but all the Latinos that she's adding to that campaign? She's obviously trying to communicate to the Latino community here. I'm with you.
I think it's disingenuous, and the reason why I think that is because she's hiring people that's going to give her the voice that she doesn't have. She has never been active with the Hispanic community. Even when she was in the Senate, she was silent, especially on immigration. So I think these people are giving her the voice that she doesn't have. Even when she's out on the campaign trail, she never speaks without a very scripted piece of paper in front of her. This woman cannot speak to a person from the heart. She has to have a script in front of her. So I think people like Loreya are going to give her that voice. And I have been on panels with this young lady. She's very bright, but she will also tell you that the vote is not in the pocket of the Democrats. She will also tell you that the Dreamers are very open to people that will listen to what they want to say and the needs of their family.
And that is true. Isn't Jeb Bush someone who Latinos are willing to give more than the benefit of the doubt?
Marrying a Hispanic is one thing, being against us is another, and trying to deport our folks.
But how is Jeb Bush?
When has he shown that he's against us? I don't understand.
He doesn't even support immigration reform. He wants to deport, just like the rest of your candidates. But let's go back to Hillary Clinton for a second.
But really quick.
As the first Latino to serve twice in the White House in a senior role, let me just make it clear. I worked for Hillary Clinton. To say that she can't communicate with our community or hasn't been with Latinos, I worked for her in 1995 through 2000, right? I know this lady I know how she communicates with our community. I know how she's been with our community all of my adult life. She has fought for us, she has stood with us, and she stands with us again today.
But she also, but really quick, but she also said that the kids that were showing up here undocumented should be deported back to Central America. Now, she's changed. Maybe she was not as informed as to the causes of these kids coming over here, but there's some Latinos that still remember that.
And back in 2008.
And going back to Jeb Bush, just for the benefit of the audience, Jeb Bush has been on the record saying that he's for immigration reform. He's against the executive order allowing for deportation relief. I guess that's the difference.
Hillary's record hasn't completely shown that she's all on board. I mean, to be honest.
She's pretty on. I mean, what she just announced in Las Vegas, pretty on board. Yeah. I mean, if you
she's going farther than anybody else.
She's going further than anybody else.
As far as I'm concerned, those are just words. I have yet to see really any action from her, and so that's what I'm saying. She's got no record, and so the only record that she has is a record of lies, a record of a lack of transparency, as we've been able to see with her emails and with her hard drives and with Benghazi. So all these things show a person's character, and that's what I think the Latino community should really be looking at.
All right, Mo.
Well, I'll just
10 seconds.
10 seconds. Listen, I'm going to stand with Hillary because she's been for our community as long as I've been an adult. I worked for her, and I know that she has been. And all I know about these 72,000 Republican candidates for president is they're anti-gay, they're anti-women, they're anti-Hispanic, and one of these days I'd love to find out what they're for.
All right, Mo Vela, Judy Pino, and John Gonzalez, they'll stick around when we come back. Giving Latin America its long-awaited saint in waiting. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Hispanic Agenda. To some, he was a champion of the poor and a defender of human rights during El Salvador's civil war. Others called him a supporter of an armed revolution. 35 years after his assassination by right-wing death squads, the beatification of Archbishop Oscar Romero, Monsignor Romero, is here. Let me welcome back this week's Roundtable. John Gonzalez from ABC7 News, attorney Mo Vela, ex-advisor to Vice President Biden, and Judy Pino from the Libre Initiative. Welcome back to the show. This is a huge story for our local Salvadoran community, which is the biggest as to Latinos in the area. This is a man that many people respect, and this is a moment that they've been waiting for a very long time.
A public figure, Alejandro, if you're Central American, if you're Catholic, you know who this person is. Archbishop Romero, a martyr, controversial, I guess you can say. But this decision is just the latest example of the Catholic Church really showing a change. The Latino community, the Latino culture, the race is really showing its face, and for the first time you're seeing a change in the trend, maybe not a change in the traditions of the oldest church, the oldest religion in the world, but definitely a change. I mean, we saw it a few years ago with Pope Francis, of course. Obviously, he's from Argentina.
Do you think this has to do with that, with the fact that we have the first Latin American
Pope? Well, some will argue,
Pope?
is this just a way to get the Latino community back on board? They're losing numbers in droves in the Catholic Church.
In Latin America.
Right.
Yeah.
And others say, well, if he deserves to be a saint, he deserves to be a saint. I mean, there are certain stipulations and rules to become a saint in the Catholic Church. So it depends on who you ask at this point. But it is interesting that you have the Pope and now you have this Archbishop becoming a saint. That's two huge public figures for Latin America in the Church.
Mo Vela.
You know what, I frankly don't have a very strong opinion on this one way or the other, but if beatifying, I guess is the right word, if the beatification of Monsignor Romero brings some semblance of peace and hope and some fulfillment to Latino Catholics around the world, then you know what, I give kudos to the Pope for beatifying him. I think, again, I think Latinos have been a very, very stable and consistent force in the Catholic Church
and also
for many years.
And also Mo and Judy bring healing to those folks in El Salvador who still have those arguments and conversations about the civil war in that country that caused so much death and destruction and so many thousands to have to flee El Salvador and come here.
Well, I mean, I think they could definitely empathize, or they can, you know, it's somebody that they can relate to, just especially with the way that he tragically died.
Yeah.
So
he was assassinated in the middle of a mass.
yeah. So, so that is the way of life in El Salvador, and especially here in the States, as the Salvadorian community grows, I think we're getting a lot of good reception on that. But I mean, I echo Mo with on that. I mean, as a public relations tool, you know, if I may say so, I think this is a good way to rally people back to the church
in
to a
Latin
certain
America,
extent, in Latin America.
Like John said, have been leaving the Catholic Church. I want to stay in El Salvador for just a second. With John, you were able to speak this week with the husband of this housekeeper that was tragically murdered this week, and she planned to go back to El Salvador, I understand.
Just a terrible situation, and I've been reporting on this. And my main reason for wanting to go speak to Bernardo Alfaro, the husband of this housekeeper, is because just that. That's kind of been her term as housekeeper, and she was so much more than just a housekeeper of this family in Northwest DC. She was a loving mother, a hard-working woman from El Salvador, and obviously a loving wife. And
very tragic.
They had plans, he says, 3-4 years down the road to collect as much money as they could and retire and move back to El Salvador, and then just this tragedy.
Very, very sad. Well, I want to thank
The American dream.
Yeah.
I want to thank all of you for your time. We don't have any time for more. We'll see all of you next week, hopefully. And we'll see you next week. Please check out our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter. Tune into Telemundo Washington for the Spanish version of this program, and be sure to join us again next week here on News Channel 8. Have a great weekend. Until next week.